An ABC4 News Town Hall Special, Coronavirus, a Path Forward.
Welcome back to the Utah State Capitol. We are here with gubernatorial candidate, also former GOP chair and local businessman, Thomas Wright. Thomas, great to have you with us. Let's move into the state response. More than $100 million spent under emergency spending. First off, before we get into specifics, your overall analysis of how that played out.
Look, this pandemic hit us out of nowhere. Nobody saw this coming. Nobody could have foreseen the devastation of human life, of the economic devastation. No one could have seen it. So I don't want to armchair quarterback our leaders. I believe they're doing the very best that they can do. And I want to applaud them for doing their very best, but we have definitely learned lessons, and there are things that we could have improved on. And we take those lessons and we do what we do in Utah. We move forward and we do better next time.
Okay, let's get into some of those lessons then. The top lesson that you need to learn from this, that you would if you were governor, how would you have responded differently?
You got to engage
knowing what you know now.
You got to engage the private sector quicker. I said it earlier on testing. You have to go to the private sector immediately. They have the answers, they have the innovation, they're more agile, they're more adept. Government's slow and it usually doesn't come up with the solutions. That's number one. Number two, we have to have plenty of PPE. The personal protective equipment for our healthcare professionals need to be stockpiled in Utah. We cannot rely on the federal government for that. We learned that. Let's never make that mistake again and put them at risk. And number three, we need to make sure that we preserve people's individual liberties and freedoms.
I want to hit on that a little bit more, but first I want to go back to the private sector notion. We had the private sector selling us drugs that the FDA later said, no, do not use these. They were unproven. Test Utah, there's some question about the test results we are getting back, and people are looking into that. So were there areas where maybe you needed to lean a little more on expert medical opinion than the private sector?
Absolutely, we've learned, and no-bid contracts never produce a good outcome. When you have a no-bid contract and a vendor knows that they can basically charge you whatever they want, they will. Somebody should have known about all of those decisions. I get that it was fast-paced and things were moving quickly, but when you're the CEO or you're the governor, and I do this in my business, the buck stops with you. You're the one that has to stand up and answer the questions if there's mistakes made. That's the job we're running for. I'm ready for that. I've done that in my business as a CEO, and when you make mistakes, you stand up, you own them, you apologize, you transparently admit what happened, and then you move on. If you can't do that, then you're not ready for the top spot.
Back to your comment about freedom and liberty. What do you mean by that? Get into that more specifically.
Well, look, we have a constitution that protects our individual freedoms and liberties. I believe when people are taught correct principles, they will govern themselves correctly, they will do the right thing. When they're asked to do something, Utahns always step up. They always rise to the occasion. We don't need a government that's mandating us and every little move we make. If we allow that to happen now, Glenn, we fall into a trap where the government then can do whatever they want. And we are Americans because we understand individual freedom and liberty, that God gave us these inalienable rights, and that government's job is to protect them. Government doesn't create them, government protects them. And our Constitution was an inspired document that did just that. We need to honor that document and those old traditions, because if we don't, then the government can step in any time and say, hey, we can take people's liberties away. And believe me, government will if you allow them to.
And you saw that happening from your perspective in this scenario.
I think we're walking right up against that line. I think people have the freedom and the right to do what they want. When the government is tracking you on an app or telling you you can't cross over a state border, you're getting dangerously close, or you're in that area where you're violating people's freedoms and individual liberties.
Where most may do the right thing, as you suggest, there are always going to be those that don't, though. We have two examples in Utah County where businesses appear to have not done the right thing, and they became hotspots. How do you deal with those situations?
Government can't compel people to do the right thing. We have free agency, Glenn. We know that. We know that our agency is what makes us who we are. That's why everybody aspires to be America. We have the oldest constitution and the shortest constitution on the planet, and everybody's copied it, because it's an inspired document that shows us the way forward. We need to make sure that we don't violate that. If we do, we're going to find ourselves in a situation we don't want to be in. So look, those businesses, if those businesses are out there, the consumers always answer. If they're putting people at risk, the free market responds. People won't do business there, and the consequence is its own.
So overall, is it important to issue directives like we saw from the governor, and give people information saying this is really how we should move forward? Or
I believe the proper role of government is to provide citizens with the data and the information that government has, and to let people govern themselves and decide for themselves what they want to do. And if people want to do those things, then they can. I don't want to sound like the person that doesn't take the pandemic seriously, or that I don't understand how contagious it is, or that I don't know how many lives have been lost. I know, Glenn. I watch it every day. It's devastating. But I also know that we can't give up our constitutional liberties, because if we do, we're going to have way worse outcomes down the road.
Okay, one more viewer question real quick. This is from Nicole Pettingill, and this is what she asked. She says, my daughter and I work at a grocery store. We are scared going to work every day. A group of 20 people came in to shop, and none of them were wearing masks. Will you make it mandatory to wear masks when shopping?
The government's role is not to compel people. That business has the right to compel people if they want. And then they have to suffer the consequence if it hurts their business. But they have the right to say, if you want to shop here, you need to wear a mask, right? It's a private business. They have the right to do that. Citizens have the right to say, I don't want to work at this job anymore. I don't feel safe. And I hope that employee calls me. Let's find a different scenario where she feels more comfortable, because they're out there.
And
but this is that individual liberty and freedom thing that we're talking about, and it's important.
And we have seen businesses, private businesses, say, hey, look, if you want to come in here, you're wearing a mask, so you're not coming in.
And that's their right.
And
that's
others
the beauty
that have
of
not.
our country, Glenn. That is who we are. Let's never give that up. That's why we love being Americans. We're proud to be Americans. That's the foundation of who we are, not government compulsion.
All right, still more to come here on Utah's Capitol Hill. Historic levels of unemployment and widespread isolation. You could say they're taxing our mental well-being, no doubt about that. How Thomas Wright says he would address a brewing mental health crisis after the break.